This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, Happy New Year. I missed all of you. I missed the show. And did we miss anything while we're away? Any major news? Any major global events? I mean, in the space of just a few weeks, there was Trump's epic capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro and his wife. So many scenes of joy and celebration coming out of Venezuela. The Gaza ceasefire is progressing to its second phase, with Trump naming members of the Board of Peace. And Iran, we've been witnessing the incredible courage and resilience from the people of Iran fighting for their freedom. Yet during this uprising and reports that thousands and thousands of people have been killed, mostly silence from the left. I mean, where are the feminists, the protests at college campuses? And in the United States, Tim Walz, he's been utterly humiliated by a 23-year-old YouTuber, Nick Shirley, who's done an incredible job further exposing the massive fraud scandal in Minnesota. Such great work that Tim Walz is now not going to run for governor again, and thank God for that. Also here in Australia, our Prime Minister has earned himself a reputation around the world as so weak and so pathetic for his appalling response and his appalling handling of the horrific Bondi terror attack in December. I was overseas for a few weeks during our summer break and I met with lots of people over there. Plenty of them were pouring their hearts out and telling me how heartbroken and devastated they were for us after hearing the news about the attack. And then they would quickly tell me what they really think of our Prime Minister. And I can't repeat the words that they used on air, but they, like many Australians, they feel angry for us over just how poorly he has handled this tragedy. And you don't have to tell many Aussies that. The polling shows the majority of Australians rate Anthony Albanese's handling of the attack as poor. His popularity is dropping and there's now a massive rise in support for one nation. We'll be getting into all of this later in the show, but there is a lot happening right around the world. This is our first show back for the year and we'll be diving into all of this week. But coming up today, we'll be speaking with Hilary Fordwich about the anti-ICE protesters storming a church in Minnesota during a service. And we'll also speak to her about the controversy over Greenland. We'll be speaking with Caitlin Sinclair about some of the massive health changes in America thanks to the MAHA movement. And we'll be speaking to Adam Crichton about what's been happening here in Australia. But first, it has officially been 1 year of Donald Trump 2.0. 1 year ago, he was sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. Any excuse to play Donald Trump and his dance moves will do it. But the president, he's been leading a revolution. Under his leadership, the southern border has closed. Millions of illegal immigrants have self-deported. Violent crime is down in multiple cities. Deaths due to overdoses has fallen dramatically by more than 25% in the space of a year. Specifically, fentanyl deaths, they're coming right down. The economy is getting back on track. Inflation is down. And Trump's bold moves on the world stage certainly are making America's enemies pretty nervous. It's his unpredictability that makes him so dangerous to America's enemies. And he's making, of course, we know he makes plenty of threats. And I'm sorry to the lefty who came up with the most bizarre term to describe Trump with taco, the taco label. Unfortunately for this guy, Donald Trump does not always chicken out. We have seen that. He's ended several global conflicts, securing the release of hostages from terrorists in Gaza, getting European nations to pay more for defence, obliterating Iran's nuclear facilities, capturing dictator Nicolas Maduro and his wife. I mean, how likely is it that any of this would have been achieved if Kamala Harris was running America with Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who's back in the spotlight right now for his incompetence as the state is at the centre of one of the largest fraud scandals in the country. Joining us now is Hilary Fordwidge, President and founder of Strellmark. Hilary, it's great to see you again. Happy New Year to you. Let's start with the big news out of Minnesota, where over the weekend, anti-ICE protesters stormed a church during service over a pastor's alleged ties to ICE. Now, in some of the footage, one of the protesters can be heard chanting, "Justice for Renee Good," who was, of course, the woman who was tragically killed earlier this year. And vision around that is disputed. But ex-CNN host Don Lemon was at that church. Let's just take a look at some of the vision.
So you can see the protesters here have gathered over here. They're in the middle of the church. In the beginning of the church service, the pastor was speaking, and Nikema stood up and said her piece, and then the protesters surrounded her. But this is a clandestine mission. I think they found out according to them, this is according to Operation Pull-Up, that one of the pastors here is a member of ICE, and so here we go.
You thought the lead pastor.
Yeah.
I mean, storming a church during service. Hilary, can I get your reaction to this?
Well, Gabriella, lovely to be back with you again, although this is a ghastly topic because obviously we saw some parents escorting their little children out of the back there. This is a place that is very sacred. It is protected by the First Amendment, the right to individual religious, not only beliefs, but to assemble to worship. And I think this is something that's really actually rather perplexing. What was Don Lemon just like randomly in Minnesota, randomly going to church? No, I think this was something that he actually, I mean, I'm saying this purportedly, it looks like he instigated this. He was definitely there under very suspicious circumstances, and that's being extremely generous. And I think this is something that matters across America, their religious beliefs and their right to worship. So an absolutely red for optics.
And looking at Democrats, celebrities, so many of them blaming ICE officers for the chaos we're seeing in cities. I mean, AOC said that ICE should be abolished. California Governor Gavin Newsom suggested that ICE was state-sponsored terrorism after Renee Good died. But then he seemed to walk back those comments from his press office during an exchange with Ben Shapiro. Let's just listen to this.
Your press office tweeted out that it was state-sponsored terrorism, which, I mean, Governor, I do have to ask you about that. Yeah. That sort of thing makes our politics worse.
Yeah.
I mean, it does.
Yeah.
I mean, our ICE officers obviously are not terrorists.
Yeah.
A tragic situation is not state-sponsored terrorism.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
He's so slippery. I mean, he says that's fair in that interview with Ben, and then he'll say something completely different when he's speaking to his audience.
Well, this actually, Gabriella, is why only those politicians that have a true star north really do well. That was like Ronald Reagan. He knew exactly what he stood for. That's what the difference with Donald Trump. You can actually go back and see clips from him since 1994, and he has been consistent in every single, maybe it's 84, but every single interview, he was totally and utterly consistent with wanting to have America first, how we've been, taken advantage of with trade agreements, etc. And this shows Governor Newsom and his true colors. It's rather like, Gabriella, during COVID when he was discovered in that, remember the French Laundry, that restaurant in California, without a mask, eating with people. Meanwhile, he imposed other regulations on his state. He flip-flops, he's slippery, and yes, this is disingenuous to say the very least, and to backstab his own administration.
Absolutely. Now, Hilary, I'm really curious to get your thoughts about Greenland and the controversy around Greenland. The Danish Prime Minister says that Europe will not be blackmailed as European leaders push back against Trump's Greenland tariffs. Of course, the president announced that 8 countries would face 10% export tariffs for their opposition to the US taking control of the island. And Trump has also tweeted, NATO has been telling Denmark for 20 years that you have to get the Russian threat away from Greenland. Unfortunately, Denmark has been unable to do anything about it. Now it is time and it will be done. Now, look, I'm interested to get your thoughts, Hilary. I'm not sure if this is a popular move by Donald Trump. However, there's often a method to his madness. What's your assessment?
Well, a few things here. One of the other things he said was that Greenland's defense is 2 dog sleds. And that isn't actually, sadly, that far from the truth. A few items here. One thing with regard to NATO, the US really is NATO. The US has been protecting Europe and actually the whole of Western Europe, obviously the West, including this sea space and everything around Greenland, really since the Second World War. And if you said to a British taxpayer, Swedish taxpayer, Norwegian taxpayer, German taxpayer, by the way, we want you to spend 2% of your GDP protecting the US southern border, they'd all be saying, what? So the American taxpayer, Gabriella, has been funding the protection of Europe. And yes, President Trump is completely correct. They have failed to do so because the Russians there is an incursion by the Russians and actually the Chinese. Don't forget, this is about defense and it's about rare earth minerals. And those in Greenland and the Danish have actually totally and utterly failed to mine all the resources that are there. This is something that's in the interest of the West, not just the US. And one of the things I've heard, last but not least, said about President Trump, take him seriously, not literally. I think this is an opening salvo, hopefully, particularly with Speaker Johnson right now in the UK, about to speak to Parliament tomorrow. I think he's going to be very diplomatic. I don't think the US wants to lose consistent allies. And I think it's in both of the best interests to come to an agreement because our adversaries, Russia and China, they're watching this.
Yeah, no, excellent point. I have to get your thoughts on Venezuela. It was, of course, January 3 that Donald Trump announced the capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro following a successful overnight joint US military operation in Venezuela's capital of Caracas. And Maduro is, of course, facing charges including narco-terrorism and drug trafficking. And we saw celebrations from all over, people of Venezuela, all over the world celebrating in response to this. I want to get your thoughts. You know, so much has happened over the space of just a few weeks, but also your thoughts on Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I mean, you can really see how much trust the president has in him.
Yes, and I think that's rightfully so, Gabriella, because don't forget, Marco Rubio obviously was an immigrant from Cuba with his parents when he was very, very young. He speaks fluent Spanish. He understands the sort of this mentality, a South American mentality and culture from his family and his roots. So I think, number one, he has a great affinity and understanding, but also he's somebody who really experienced socialism and communism and really understands how detrimental it is. I think he truly cares about the people there. Also, he's shown his ability to manage, his ability to run things. And I think that it's either going to make him or break him. He could do a brilliant job there, or obviously it could basically thwart his political ambitions. We must remember that Venezuela, of course, is like twice the size of California with about 30 million people, many diverse factions, and of course, all these criminal gangs and these drug narco terrorists there. So I don't think it's an easy feat at all. I think it's rather challenging. I wouldn't want to take it on in the slightest. I think it's a heavy lift for anyone, even including Marco Rubio.
And just finally, it's been 1 year since Trump was sworn in as president for the second time. Can I get your assessment, your thoughts on year one of Donald Trump?
Well, I think a few things here. I do think he spent a lot of time, rightfully so, for the world with all of the peace agreements that he's made. I think he's done a lot of good actually for the world, but the world doesn't vote for him. I actually think it's somewhat of a pity there hasn't been far more emphasis. I think all of the initial energies, all of his focus should have been on the US economy, making the US economy great again, because with the midterms coming up, Gabriella, the Republicans have such a tiny, small margin due to people like, Marjorie Taylor Greene, those that have are no longer standing, retired, and or no longer in their positions. So it's such a tiny margin. If the Democrats win many seats, that will make him a lame duck president, and that will be dreadful for the world and for the US. So I think it's a pity he didn't spend more time on the affordability issues and the domestic economy. However, his approval ratings have improved. I think overall, there aren't many people that can point to failures. Those that obviously oppose him deporting, or the illegals, they should look at what Obama did. Obama was referred to as the deporter in chief, as was Clinton. Both of them deported more, Gabriella, and you never heard the left having any objection to that.
No, you're absolutely right. Hillary Fordwich, president and founder of Strelma, thank you so much for joining us. Wonderful to speak with you again.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you, Gabriella.
It's time for Media Meltdowns. And before we show you the bizarre ways that mainstream media is deciding to cover news, I have to say that the video of the year goes to YouTuber Nick Shirley, whose work has further exposed how widespread the fraud scandal in Minnesota really is. And here is just part of the 43-minute mega viral video.
Here in Minnesota, massive fraud is taking place within the government and the Somali population. Here, this building alone, Quality Learning Center, is a daycare, yet they spelled learning wrong and they said leering. This daycare alone in 2025 has received $1.9 million from the government. And the strange things about these childcare centers is there's no one here right now. It's midday on a weekday. And if you were to try to go inside, it's completely closed and the windows are all blacked out. No one's working, midday, children should be in here, and this place is licensed for 99 children, and this is the outside. There's no windows, no nothing, and like I said, they literally spelt the word wrong on their sign. This is open and blatant fraud taking place here inside of Minnesota.
Quality Leering Center. You cannot make this stuff up. Well done to Nick Shirley. I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so sad and frustrating, but Nick Shirley has been out there doing what reporters should be doing. I mean, going to these centres, bringing the receipts and asking questions. What a concept. So what does CNN do in response to Nick's video? They go after him. No, not Tim Walz, who's supposed to be running the state, not the daycare centres in question. They direct all of their hard questions at Nick. Here's CNN.
But surely you don't think a daycare should just be unlocked. You shouldn't be able to just walk into a daycare.
It should be a reception.
No, every daycare is locked.
Their doors are locked.
And so, okay, you bring up a fair point. Then why can't they actually give me information how to enroll a child?
Yeah, it's just a failed gotcha question from CNN. Every ordinary person can see this. And here's the reporter again grilling Nick Shirley for helping further expose fraud.
How do you know that all the allegations that you're making are true?
How do I know that they're true? Well, we showed you guys what was happening, and then you guys can go ahead and make your own analysis.
We're coming so we can make our own analysis. Are you 100% sure you're true?
Yeah, I am 100% sure I'm true.
We can make our own analysis. I mean, it's just too much for CNN. But interestingly, CNN ends up admitting, without admitting, that Nick Shirley was spot on.
And is looking into Shirley's claims.
Hi, my name's Whitney Wild. I'm a correspondent for CNN.
We reached out to several of the daycares featured in the now viral video. Only one daycare facility answered and said they are a legitimate business.
Joining us now is Caitlin Sinclair, host of The Caitlin Sinclair Show. Caitlin, it is great to see you again. Happy New Year. Before we get into all things MAHA, I have to get your reaction to this. The mainstream media, clearly still doesn't get it. Instead of going after Tim Walz, going after the fraud, they go after this 23-year-old YouTuber who put together this phenomenal video that was going viral for a reason.
Yeah, Gab, new year, same games by the mainstream media, right? In case your viewers needed just one more reason to despise the media, they just laid it out on a silver platter. Legacy media is dead. And guess what, Gab? They killed themselves. So Nick Shirley here, who's a friend and an incredible journalist, he didn't just expose the Somalian daycare fraud. He exposed what little trust was left of the mainstream media, where their priorities actually lay, and how incompetent and corrupt these outlets are. And it's so sad. But again, a new year, I don't think the American people are going to a lot of these legacy outlets anymore. I read in the New York Times, they actually published an attack on Nick Shirley, calling him a propagandist aligned with MAGA. Had this been a liberal journalist, social media exposing something on social media, possibly, Gab, in a red state that was aligning with the Obama administration or the Biden administration, that journalist would have been Time Person of the Year.
Of course.
You, I, and all of your viewers know that. So the hypocrisy stays dormant. And again, it's a new year, so I don't think the American people are going to stand it any longer.
You're absolutely right. Even the labeling, they label him a MAGA YouTuber. I mean, he's out there doing some incredible work. He did such a great job that now Governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, has announced that he's dropping his bid to run for a third term as governor. So well done to Nick Shirley, and a reminder again just how disastrous it would have been if Tim Walz was vice president. I mean, can you imagine? Now, Caitlin, we have to get to MAHA. There have been some massive changes in America thanks to the MAHA movement. First of all, the food pyramid. So the food pyramid from the 90s that we grew up on is essentially out. It's been flipped. And now protein, dairy, healthy fats, fruits and vegetables, they make up the largest category. And the recommendations are also calling for Americans to avoid eating highly processed foods. Yes, incredible. Can you please talk to us about why this had to be done and also the impact that this is going to have?
Yeah, absolutely, Gab. I mean, before this change, they were actually recommending that we eat about 6 to 11 servings of carbs and grains a day. Anyone with one brain cell could have told you that that was pretty corrupt. So this is putting real foods, real whole foods at the center of your dinner plate. Once again, this will be a major change for schools, for kids, seed oil free, recommending we eat red meat and meat again, not being so afraid of meat, of dairy. Of course, whole milk is back in the classrooms, whole milk is back in your refrigerators. So massive changes that are going to start from the inside out. We talk so much in MAHA about chronic disease and what RFK Jr. has pledged to dismantle is the chronic disease epidemic. And so much of that, Gab, was coming from our food supply, is coming from our food supply. And so flipping that pyramid upside down, this is what we voted for. It starts right there.
And also recommending consuming less alcohol. Now, this is a trend that plenty of Gen Zs, millennials are already onto. Plenty of them are already ditching it. I'm on that trend. I'm not at the stage yet where I'm ruling it out 100%, but to be honest with you, I'm pretty close to it. I'm pretty done because life is better without it. Can you talk to us about this recommendation?
Yeah, I'm with you there. I've done months without alcohol, and I've told myself that the cons are starting to outweigh the pros for so many in our generation and the younger generations, right? And I think so much of that is the overuse of other things that are inflammatory, and that's our makeup these days, going outside these days. The kids are like allergic to air, Gab. And then we just talked about the food. So the food is really where you're just walking around with chronic inflammation, then having a drink or two is adding to that inflammation. So these, I don't want to say these kids, but the younger generation really is growing up in an era where they are just chronically inflamed and stressed out. Of course, adding on top of that SSRIs, which are gut disruptors, which are so common now, and doctors are prescribing like candy. So it's a whole host of issues, and we could be here forever. But yes, the recommendation for less alcohol is actually a trend, this sober curiosity movement that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are kind of picking up on their own. Yeah. And again, all of that is to reduce inflammation and therefore reduce the chronic disease epidemic in this country.
And another huge change that has been made is the number of vaccine recommendations. So RFK Jr. said that after an exhaustive review of the evidence, we are aligning the US childhood vaccine schedule with international consensus while strengthening transparency and informed consent. Now, this decision protects children, respects families, and rebuilds trust in public health. Now, Caitlin, it's of course worth noting that all vaccines currently recommended by CDC will remain covered by insurance without cost sharing, and no family is going to be losing access. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is about parents and physicians making choices, making individualized decisions based on risk while maintaining, of course, strong protection against serious disease. Whenever we talk about vaccines, there's always a lot of controversy, but can you just break it down for us?
Yeah, I'd love to. And you're absolutely right on that. This was always about returning the power to the hands of the parents and having them be able to make informed decisions on behalf of their own kids. So this is exactly what we voted for the future of this country's children. But the reality, Gab, is this country, the United States, has been way out of touch compared to the other Western countries. The United States vaccine schedule was 72 vaccines from when the time you were born to the age 18. 72 vaccines is what they were recommending compared to other westernized countries. That was way out of touch. So what President Trump asked the FDA to do, HHS and a few other agencies were involved. They asked them, can you compare and review this vaccine schedule to, again, other countries, compare and contrast? And what they brought back was pretty staggering. Now, you brought up another good point. If parents want to give their kids the full vaccine schedule, they absolutely can, and that will still be covered by insurance. But the part the media has been omitting is that parents are now informed, right? Knowledge is power, and this was always the plan from Secretary Kennedy to give parents information and they can do what they want with it. So this was a major win as far as having that information. We're empowering parents and physicians to choose what's best for their kids.
Yeah, and there was certainly a lot of support from parents on that one. Finally, I have to get your thoughts on how the Democrats are going. Axios is reporting that only one of nearly 20 Democrats tipped as 2028 presidential contenders would say clearly that a man cannot become a woman. Any surprises there, Caitlin?
Isn't this the same party that can't define what a woman is? Correct me if I'm wrong. If this doesn't confirm how bad our political landscape is right now, I do not know what will. Now that we're in an election year, of course, I think these candidates, these Democrats, have begun to just put anything out there, whatever will stick to their voters, because of course it's an election year. So how far they will take these lies with the voters, I don't know, but buckle up because it's about to get real crazy once again.
And also, congratulations, the Caitlin Sinclair show. I believe it launches next week. I can't wait to watch. I can't wait to listen. What can we expect? I'm assuming all things MAHA. What else?
Yes, that's right. It's really just the conversations I'm already having, Gab, in the rooms I'm already in, political sphere, a day in the life, in the green room, on the TV screen. So I'm just here to take my viewers and followers along for the ride. So it's launching this week. Wherever you get your podcast, you'll be able to tune in.
Congratulations. I can't wait to listen, to watch. It's going to be very exciting. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Gab.
Joining us now is Adam Crichton, Chief Economist at the IPA. Adam, thank you so much for your time. Look, we've got to start with a serious and sad topic. It's been more than 5 weeks since the horrific Bondi terror attack. And there's, of course, still so much anger at the Prime Minister over his lack of action on anti-Semitism in the lead up to that terror attack, and also his response to it. I mean, not going to funerals, he was dragged kicking and screaming until finally calling for a royal commission, and then trying to rush through hate speech laws in response to it. Look, I also mentioned at the start of the show, I was overseas during the break, and so many people that I spoke with overseas were saying how devastated they were for us, seeing the horror that unfolded at Bondi Beach, and then many were very quick to criticise our Prime Minister for his weak and slow response. And a recent Resolve Monitor poll found that the majority, 58% of people in Australia, say that this response to the attack, or his response, I should say, has been poor. And of course, during his first address to Parliament, he refrained from explicitly naming radical Islamist extremism in his condolence motion. What are your thoughts, Adam? Can I get your assessment of his leadership and his response?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's obviously a shocking tragedy, and it's definitely tarnished Australia's image internationally for sure. And the hurt and pain and suffering will be with the families and the communities of that area for many, many months, many, many years. As for the Prime Minister's response, look, it was slow and sluggish, and obviously there's so much awkwardness because, as you know, the Labor Party and government, they have a lot of seats with a majority Muslims in them, and so they have to kind of dance on pins, if you like, to avoid saying what the real problem was, which is radical Islam, as you said before. And I think that in turn has created more anger in the Jewish community, the fact that the government won't actually say what the real problem is. It blames everything else but that. And of course, there was the delay with the Royal Commission, which we're now having, which was a right thing and good thing. I mean, Australia tends to have Royal Commissions for, for everything left, right and centre, pink bats and, shipping licences. So it certainly should have had a Royal Commission for something as serious as this. Absolutely. I think it's disappointing now we're in the response situation and we have this extraordinarily rushed bill, which I think is going to be voted on this week. There's the hate speech bill, there's the gun aspect to it. Thankfully, I think the coalition has got those two bills split, as they should be. I mean, the gun bill I don't personally care about very much, but the other one I care about a great deal, and it is a disastrous bill, and we all have to hope that it fails. So far, it looks like it will fail, but if the Greens manage to make it even worse, because of course they have the balance of power in the Senate, then it's quite possible that we'll have a hate speech law that is the toughest in the world of any place. And as I wrote in my column in The Australian last week, actually tougher than China's hate speech law. So, you know, we like to criticise China for being totalitarian. Well, ours is even worse in that regard. In China, for instance, there has to actually be someone feeling intimidated or hated, whereas in the Australian bill, there doesn't actually need to be any actual real hate or intimidation, only the possibility of it from a hypothetical third person. So obviously, the threshold for criminality, and this, you know, these are not civil actions, these are criminal actions. If you're convicted of saying something which someone finds hateful, then the minimum prison sentence is 5 years. So that is pretty extreme. It's going to have a profoundly bad impact on civil society in Australia, political speech, comedy, artistic expression. So we really have to hope that fails. I personally think, why not wait for the Royal Commission to conclude and to reach its verdict? You know, that's going to find what were the real causes of Bondi. And my personal view is it wasn't hate speech. I mean, violence is already illegal. Incitement to violence is already very illegal at state and federal level. This is a whole other question of law, which I don't think we need.
Oh, Adam, it is such a huge concern. I also want to talk to you about more of the polling that we've seen recently. It's pretty extraordinary that this exclusive news poll conducted for The Australian shows that support for One Nation has surged ahead of the coalition for the first time. One Nation's primary vote has risen 7 points to 22%, with the coalition dropping 3 points to a record low of 21% and Labor falling 4 points to 32%. It's absolutely extraordinary, but it doesn't surprise me. What do you make of it?
No, not at all. Not at all. I think at the moment One Nation is becoming the opposition, the real opposition. They oppose the government on the question of immigration. They oppose the government on the issue of net zero. They actually have policies out there. And let's face it, immigration and net zero, they were, at least until now perhaps, the two biggest political issues in Australia. And the coalition doesn't really have a policy on either of them. And yet they're meant to be in this reflection period since the election last year. Well, that was May. It's a long time ago. You know, where's the report? It's still not out. And I think that suggests that they don't internally know what the position is going to be. Now, they have come out, as you know, the Liberal Party has come out and said that they oppose net zero, but they don't really talk about it at all. I mean, One Nation's out there on the front foot. And I think Pauline Hanson, for all her supposed and alleged flaws as a leader, she's probably the most famous politician in Australia, I would say. Far more famous than the Prime Minister. She's been around for a very long time. She's very dogged. You know, she's ruthless, and she has an incredible life story. And I think more and more people, including young people, actually, I've got friends who are young, and they say that that they're going to vote for the first time for One Nation, and that never used to be the constituency of One Nation. It tended to be older people. So I think when you're seeing in these polls now younger people turning to One Nation, that should be a real concern for the two majors. And I think if this, if this primary vote is held at about 22-23%, that is going to be a huge earthquake at the next election. I mean, you're looking at 2 to 3 senators in every state for One Nation, and the massive loss for Labor and the Libs. I mean, that first poll you mentioned just earlier, it was Labor supporters going to One Nation just as much, I believe, as coalition supporters. So she's drawing from both sides. And what you may also see is all those other minor little right-wing parties, the Libertarians, the Clive Palmers, all those, they may just merge with One Nation, and then it will be even bigger.
Wow, it's incredible. I've been hearing it too. I've been hearing it in different circles here in Australia, and also Pauline Hanson's name was being dropped while I was overseas too. She's getting global recognition. Now, Kevin Rudd is stepping down as Australia's ambassador to the US. The White House statement around this was, "We wish him well." Now, Adam, you wrote back in 2022 that Kevin Rudd's appointment as ambassador to Washington is likely to go one of two ways, brilliantly or disastrously. I'd like your thoughts on that. And of course, you wrote back actually in 2024, Trump 2.0 could end Kevin Rudd's Washington stint. And you weren't wrong about that either. Don't hold back. Give us your thoughts around the departure.
I got those forecasts right. No, well, I think I wrote 2 columns, and you mentioned one, and certainly it was the disaster in the end. But I think I also wrote one that says he has to go. And I remember at the time being mocked by various leftist commentators saying, "Oh, you're being hysterical, blah blah blah." But no, that was right. He did have to go, and people saying, "Oh, he's going at the end of his term." Not really. He's got more than a year left, and believe me, that's a job you don't leave because it's a great job. Have you seen the house? Unbelievable mansion you get there with staff and a lot of prestige, a lot of influence, very high salary, much higher salary than an ordinary cabinet minister. So he definitely did not want to leave that job. And also, he's gone back to his old job, which is being the boring senior fellow of some think tank. Actually, I shouldn't say that because I'm a senior fellow at a think tank. No, it's very, very exciting. But compared to being the ambassador to Washington, it's definitely a step back. So I imagine that's a stepping stone for him to try to get some sort of UN job. But he will find that difficult because the US obviously is very influential in that body. And if Trump is true to his word, saying that I'll never like you, then he probably won't. And it'll be hard for him to get one of those. So he might be just waiting for the next presidential election to roll on by. Or who knows, he may even come home. He may even come back to Australia and try to be Governor General. Wouldn't that be something?
Wouldn't Aussies love that? Adam Crichton, well done with your predictions. Brilliant to speak with you. Thank you so much for making the time. We really appreciate it.
That's okay. Thanks for having me.
And that is Power Hour. Thank you so much for joining us for our first show back for 2026. We'll see you again tomorrow. And don't forget to subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.